one of what I believe is the most underrated strategies when selling over the phone, which is curiosity. So this is something that I'm working a lot on with the real estate salespeople that I'm coaching, that I train. Because here's what I hear most often. When I train and coach a real estate salesperson, and they come to me in the beginning, we start to look at some of their sales calls. We start to record their actual prospecting phone calls so we can really look and hear what is it that we're saying and how we're saying it. And for most new salespeople, this is true, that we get kind of this nervous, overly enthusiastic, what I call sales voice or phone voice. And it sounds something like this, right? So a prospect picks up the phone. Hey, Bob, this is Brandon with Billy Bob's Real Estate. How are you today? And that overly enthusiastic voice is only comes from what? Telemarketers. And when a prospect picks up a phone to hear something like that, we automatically start to raise that resistance of the prospect, and the call doesn't go very far because the prospect thinks nothing but, man, I wish I didn't pick up this call. What do I need to do to get off this call? And so they start to give you sales resistance immediately because we've come off too salesy, like we have something to sell, and the prospects just don't want to hear it. You could have $1 million that you're giving away to that prospect because they answered the call that day, and it wouldn't matter because of the tonality in which we are using. So what we have to do is this. We have to invert that. We have to think to ourselves, and we've tested this for years and years and years. There's all kinds of studies and research behind this as well. We have to communicate in a way that elicits the prospect's curiosity. We have to communicate in a way that pulls the prospect in so that they start to say, what is this call about? And I might be open to hearing this person out. And so what we have to do is we have to communicate in a way where we almost appear like we're struggling a bit. And so here's the analogy that I give a lot of my coaching clients that I'm going to give to you here on this video. So just imagine a world for just a second. You go to the grocery store and you see a little old, nice lady struggling to put her groceries in her trunk. And she sees you coming and she says, hey, would you help me with these? First off, how does that make you feel when you see the old lady struggling to do something that maybe you find so easy to do, and then that person then asks you to help? It probably empowers you to do something for someone else that maybe makes you feel good about yourself. At least that's what how most people would feel. So what do we have to do to be the old lady on the phone? This is the analogy. This is the vision I want to have you think about, so that you come across to the prospect as someone that not only is struggling, but here's the key thing, that the prospect wants to help out. You see, when most salespeople are prospecting and they're talking to people over the phone, they are eliciting something called psychological reactance, which is simply when somebody feels as though their freedom to make their own decisions is being taken away. And when that occurs, somebody starts to resist that other person. So what we have to do is communicate in a way that lowers that reactance, and best case is remove it all altogether. So we do that by communicating as such where we are almost confused, like that we're struggling on the call. So the prospect feels that come through the phone call where they want to help us, where we elicit their curiosity. So let me give you a couple scenarios, or give you an example of what this could sound like in a role play, so that you might be able to use this on your next sales phone call. So rather than calling a prospect and getting all overly enthusiastic, which we know doesn't work very well, let's pretend we're calling a prospect, and that prospect, of course, his name is Bob, and a man picks up the phone, and that person says, hello. Here's how you might respond to that to elicit some curiosity, lower sales resistance. You might say something like, hey, I'm not even sure if I have the right number. I was looking for Bob. And you act confused. Now, what do you think that person's going to do? They don't know necessarily. They don't feel as though, rather, that's the key thing. They don't feel as though it's a sales call. So they start to get curious. Who is this and what is this call about? So they say yes. And then the next thing you say to keep playing or to keep eliciting that curiosity from the prospect, don't get all overly enthusiastic. You say, listen, I'm not even sure this call is appropriate or if you can help me out or not. I was really hoping just to maybe ask you a quick question and then you could tell me if we need to talk or not. Would that be okay? And now when we go permission-based, now we're playing to something called the principle of consistency, where we've given all of the perceived control to the prospect. So the prospect has a decision to make. They can either engage in the conversation or not, and they're the ones that get to make that decision. And what you will find is that most of the time the prospect says, sure, what's this about? Go ahead. Something like that, because their curiosity is so high that now when they verbalize to have the conversation, and that principle of consistency, which researchers have shown that when people verbalize a commitment, the likelihood for them to behave in congruency with that commitment is much higher. That you're now able to get into a much better conversation with a prospect when you approach it this way, where you are assuming as though they might not be interested in what you have to talk about, because all we're looking to do when we make an outbound prospecting phone call is to sell, not an appointment, not your product, not your service, but simply a conversation. Because isn't it true that we have to have a conversation with a prospect to determine if the prospect has a need, if the prospect has pain, if the prospect is open to what it is that we're selling? And so hopefully that makes sense. Try this on your next phone call. Let me know how it works. So that's it for today's show. If you got any value, I hope that you do hang out, you subscribe. If you're a real estate professional, you're looking for consulting or mentoring or coaching, I will put a link underneath this video. Feel free to schedule a coaching consultation with our team. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you and what it is that we could do to help you build a listing-based real estate sales business. And then you can decide if working with me at this point makes sense or not. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Appreciate all your support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.